The rumors of Alireza Firouzja's demise in chess are greatly overblown. He's still got the magic.
So get ready for some Alireza magic. This was played a few days ago in the Champions Chess Tour event on chess.com, and it's classic swashbuckling Alireza Firouzja. Now, what's Daniel referring to? Well, Alireza mentioned recently that he was dabbling in this side career in fashion. We also haven't seen him play that much over the board chess, so it gets you wondering, speculating, is he still into his chess? Well, this really shows the doubters why he's still the #1 Blitz player in the world. So let's see what happened. His opponent is Gregor Oparin, no slouch at all, and he kicks off with pawn d4. So Alireza goes knight to f6. We see c4 and now e6 invites a mainline Nimzo Indian, but knight f3 avoids it, and Alireza goes back into a queen's gambit declined. And we now see pawn to g3, the Catalan opening, and Daniel cracks a good joke about this one actually later in the game. So I'll show you that clip at the moment that he says it. It's a pretty funny one, I'll have to use it in future. Keep it in the repertoire. Anyway, Bishop b4 check, now played by Alireza. And what's the point of this move? Well, after bishop d2 from white, which is the main line, Alireza drops back, losing a tempo. What's that all about? Well, white's actually going to have to spend another tempo improving that bishop. So they get the tempo back. But by decoying the bishop here, well, you've taken away any kind of lines where you might want to fianchetto. So bishop g2 now on the board, both players castle. Alireza develops his second knight into the game, and now the next move from Oparin is weird, because the main move here is queen c2. And just to show you a couple more moves, this bishop now normally goes to f4. Over 1,000 games here, game goes on like this. But what we see in this game is not queen c2, but bishop to c3. Just a really ugly looking move, and it comes back to bite Oparin. You can't develop the knight there now. This bishop just looks like a big pawn, and Alireza just gets a really harmonious game now. So we now see c takes on d5. Now, by the way, if you try go b3 to tuck this bishop back, well, it's just a bit slow. Black can get a good game, lead in development, better pawn structure with something like this. So instead, we see captures. It does activate this knight, but here's Oparin's idea. He pushes e4 with tempo, so at least he's taking the center in compensation for the bishops. But what does Alireza do? And this is so typical of his style. He drops back the knight. He doesn't pick up the bishop pair, allow the knight to harmoniously develop. So he keeps pieces on the board. He loves complications. He's so good tactically and already starts pressuring this center. And the best move here, interestingly, is just d5. Open up the bishop, look to swap it for the knight, then you can develop this knight here. But Oparin goes knight b to d2, and already now Alireza, he starts taking over. So he pressures that e-pawn. We see queen e2 defending, and c5 strikes at the heart of the white position. The rook now comes to the d-file, eyeing the black queen. We see captures, knight recaptures, and knight c5 played. And there's a threat in the air now to put that knight onto a4. A knight on the rim is dim, but not if it has a purpose to not only pick up the bishop, but damage this pawn structure in a bad way. Then a rook could come, everything like that. So you want to respond to the threat. b3 is playable, but then you weaken the c3 square. So Oparin, he goes knight to c4, dealing with this threat tactically. Because now if you go knight a4, well, when this knight cleared to c4, it cleared the d-file, and now there's these tactics opening the rook against the queen. So coming back here, Alireza goes queen to e8, coming off the d-file. And what I love about this is that the queen looks a bit passive here, but the way in which Alireza activates it into the game is just a thing of beauty. So the e-pawn is attacked, has to be dealt with. If you go f3, it's pretty ugly. You shut out your own bishop, you weaken the king. So instead we see e5. It is the computer's top move, but although you gain the space, you give up this huge d5 square. Black's usually pretty happy securing that outpost. There's no more pawns that can challenge that piece. So the bishop is pressured. That would be an ugly pawn structure. It drops back to d2. It does now dominate that d5 knight, but that's still the more powerful minor piece. This bishop's kind of just getting in the way of the other pieces. We now see bishop a6, so leaving the long diagonal, yes, but this diagonal it lands on is more potent. And b3 is already played just to try and overprotect this knight. Rook d8 now played, and queen g4 from Oparin. So he's trying to generate some play against the black king. He is threatening bishop h6, then picking up the exchange if white defends the mate threat with g6. But what does Alireza do now to parry the threat? Well, pawn to f5. And this is where the harmony of the queen coming into the game just all comes together really beautifully. Now, you don't want to capture pawn en passant, because otherwise you activate all of these black pieces. And this is why black's got this compensation for the damaged pawn structure and stands a lot better. You know, queen f4 forced to stay with this knight so it doesn't drop with the rook. And then there's all sorts of nasty attacking ideas, hopping the knight in, opening the rook. f2 is about to cave in. This is terrible for white. So you can't take here. The queen drops back. And now queen g6 carries on the activation, defends this pawn, looks down at the king. Knight c6 played, triple fork, but easily dealt with rook to d7. We see the bishop falling with check. This rook recaptures, and now here Oparin, if he could rewind the clock, he would definitely go pawn to f4, but his sense of danger lets him down. Now this does weaken the e4 square. You have weakened this diagonal, although you've got the dark squared bishop that black doesn't have. You know, you can take some defensive measures, but what we see in the game is bishop e1. Now also logical, opens up the rook, possibly opens the queen to transfer to c2, break the pin, then you can try and land a knight on d6. You know, there's some nice ideas here for white, but there's a big problem, and it's pawn to f4. This attack is now huge, and Oparin does not find the right response. His best move was rook d4, covering a number of key squares on this fourth rank. But what he plays is pawn b4, trying to kick around Alireza's pieces, and he was probably expecting knight a4, then he brings the rook to cover this square and that kind of thing, and okay, game goes on, black's a bit better, but there's not too much in it. But what does Alireza play? Well, as is so typical of his style, he seizes the initiative. So can you guess the move he played here to just take over the game? So the move he played was pawn to f3. Great move, not only attacking these two pieces, but clearing other pieces to enter the game. Now obviously the queen can't capture, it drops to the rook, plus the queen is defending this knight. So the bishop captures, and now can you see the follow-up move played? So taking advantage of the bishop leaving this file, the queen now pinning this pawn, we see knight to f4, hitting the queen on e2. So it drops back to f1 to stay with the knight, to cover the h3 square, and now the second knight jumps into the attack. And look at that absolute octopus. As you can see, I was having some fun here, drawing some paint on the board, Hikaru-esque, right? And anytime I see an absolute monster octopus on d3, it reminds me so much of the very famous Karpov versus Kasparov game, 1985 World Championship, just an absolute gem of a game by Garry Kasparov. Do check it out if you've never seen it. Now, the thing about this octopus is it also cuts the communication of the queen with this knight. So there's a threat to take. So what does Oparin do? Well, move this knight, but he first flicks in this b5 move, and it is the top engine move. Now, it's not entirely clear the point of why this is a good move. You know, maybe it's clearing this diagonal in some lines. Maybe the bishop stands worse there than there. I didn't exactly dig deep on all of this stuff. But the knight now drops back to d2, and Alireza sees a nice path through now to keep a good advantage. So he takes on e1, and now Oparin immediately goes wrong. Just very bad calculation from him, because he lands up a piece down. So he should take on e1 here, and then after the knight checks on h3, this is the top line, king g2. Well, there's some different lines going on here. There's a really wild one with doubling the rooks, allowing white to take here, and you can actually generate quite a big mating attack. but equally you can just drop back with knight g5 and keep a nice advantage. This bishop's a bit out on the limb, these pieces are a bit on top of each other, better for black. But we didn't see takes on e1, best move. We see takes on b5, and now Alireza can go knight h3 check, king f1, the knight now takes on f3, and after captures, rook recaptures, well after check, king f7, we simply see resignation, because Alireza, he's a full knight up. Oparin's calculations have gone completely wrong. And the joke that Danya cracked, by the way, so here's the clip of it.
His Catalan didn't work out this game, so maybe in the next game he'll play a Dagalan. Let's go to Dmitry Kolar's game against Vladimir Fedoseev.
Okay, so we've all got to take up the Doggerland. Do let me know how you get on with that one in the comments. Thanks for watching. If you want to see another epic game, then check out the video on screen. See you soon.